Hello all, welcome.
Don't worry about it. Keep going. Keep going. Don't worry.
Hello, welcome all to Intro to Philosophy. My name is Jason Bollinger. I will be your philosopher this semester. So this will be the online edition. I am adapting to this, so please bear with me. If you have any issues, if you have any questions, I of course am always available via email. The syllabus is available up on Blackboard under syllabus. Hopefully you have gone up there and taken a look at it. If you haven't, here it is. This will be the topic of most of tonight's lecture. So let's go over the syllabus and see what's in it. At the very top of the syllabus, you will see in the rubric all the technical information you need about the course. You have the course, the number in the section, the CRN number, the semester, and so on. Let me call your attention to the instructor. That's me, Jason Bollinger. And my email address, which you undoubtedly will have to make use of sometime in the semester. That's jbollinger42@stlcc.edu. Normally I would keep office hours, but under the circumstances, because of the pandemic, office hours can only be conducted via email, and they're only available by appointment. I can do them via email. I can... if you insist on making a phone call, I can even do it by that, as long as you don't share my phone number with anybody. So let's talk about this class. Here is the official overview. This course is an introductory, and let me begin again. This course is an introduction to philosophical inquiry through a study of such perennial problems as the nature of truth and the possibility of knowledge, the mind-body relation, the nature and basis of morality, the nature and possibility of free will, and the nature of existence of God. The course incorporates both classical and contemporary readings. We will talk a little bit more about what exactly all of that means shortly and through the course of the semester. So, next on the syllabus is the course objectives. So the course objectives are as follows. I am responsible for teaching you every aspect of these course objectives, and in fact grading you on every aspect of these course objectives. So we should pay close attention to them. They will be our guide as the semester goes on. So the course objectives are as follows. You, by the end of this course, will be able to correctly identify and use relevant philosophical terminology, identify major classical and contemporary philosophers with their most significant contributions and positions, identify, construct, and evaluate arguments for validity and soundness and/or strength and cogency, state and explain fundamental philosophical problems and the chief philosophical theories designed to solve them, state and explain some of the most significant thought experiments that have been used to test philosophical theories. State and explain the central philosophical arguments of major classical and contemporary philosophers. Critically evaluate the main philosophical theories and arguments of major classical and contemporary philosophers. Apply relevant philosophical concepts, principles, and theories to issues of personal and public importance. Critically analyze your own beliefs and values using philosophical methods, and criticize or defend some philosophical thesis. So, we will come back to those course objectives in a little bit. Next, we move on to the textbook, which is a complicated issue. It's an inexpensive, complicated issue, but complicated nonetheless. So, the required text for this course is called The Canon and Its Critics. The second edition by Todd Furman and Mitch Avila. First and foremost, you will not pass this class if you do not have access to this book. That's the bad news. The good news is It's available online. I have an e-copy. It is up on Blackboard under textbook. There's a link that says textbook. When you open it up, you will find the textbook. Now, here's the issue. The textbook is divided into 4 sections. They are helpfully labeled 1, 2, 3, and 4. They represent the 4 different parts of the textbook. The textbook's just laid out chronologically. So like the first fourth of the textbook is under 1. The second fourth of the textbook is under 2, and so on. Okay? So there's no real significance to 1, 2, 3, 4, except that's how they were divided up. So this can be tricky. It's free. Let me just underscore that as much as possible. Okay, you're not going to have to pay $80 for this textbook that you're going to use once and then sell back to the store for $30. Okay, so let's all just take a deep breath and bask in the joy of free. Okay, now with that in mind, I have written out here on a guide to navigating your way through the textbook, which unfortunately is a little tricky. The textbook is available for free on Blackboard under the link textbook. I invite you to open the textbook now, whenever, and go through the following instructions to familiarize yourself with it. You don't want to wait until the last minute, the night before you're supposed to read something, and then have to navigate your way through all of the nonsense that is the textbook. Okay? Do yourself a favor and open it up, look around a little bit. Get yourself used to it. The book is divided into 4 PDF files. They are 1, Intro to Philosophy Text, 2, Intro to Philosophy Text, 3, Intro to Philosophy Text, and that's right, 4, Intro to Philosophy Text. These files represent the 4 sections of the original textbook. The class schedule section of the syllabus, see below, lays out which articles we will be reading when. The schedule has page numbers intended to help you find the relevant articles within the online textbook. But that can be frustrating if you don't know which of the PDF files contain the reading. To help, I have added the numbers 1 through 4 to the reading schedule as a guide to which PDF contains the reading. For instance, on 6/13, on the reading schedule, it says Quiz 1 Mill, what utilitarianism is. Now, that means that on that day you will be responsible for having read Mill's What Utilitarianism Is, and in this version of the course, having already taken the quiz, which will be available online. Okay, we'll get to that in a little bit later. But what I want to call your attention to is, it says Mill, What Utilitarianism Is. You need to be able to read that for the 13th. Notice that it has a page number, 319 to 327, right? And then after that, in parentheses, a little number 3. That little 3 in parentheses indicates which of the 4 PDF files it can be found in. Right? So, Mill's What Utilitarianism Is found on page 319 to 327 in the 3rd of the PDF files, 3, Intro to Philosophy Text. Right? Now, you might have to go hunting around a little bit, but that ought to give you a head start on figuring out where it is, as opposed to starting with, the first one, finding your way halfway through it, and then becoming frustrated and thinking that philosophy is not for you. Right. Okay. So
the June 13th assignment, that's just an example. That's not the actual assignment, right? Because the 13th is not a class day. So just don't want anyone to be confused. If you agree with that.
Yes. Thank you. The screen went dark.
No, that's just because sleeping.
Oh, okay.
It's still recording. See, time is going.
That was just an example. Mill's what utilitarianism is will be on the 11th, actually. So thank you to my lovely assistant, Beth.
Sorry.
That's fine. The last thing we want is more confusion. So this means that the Mill article for 611 can be found on pages 319 to 327. The 3 means the article can be found in the 3rd section of the online textbook. Now, even with this assistance, the online book is sometimes difficult to navigate. I strongly recommend you familiarize yourself with it when you have some free time. Each article is divided into different sections. For instance, the John Stuart Mill article, What Utilitarianism Is, begins on page 319. You will each chapter, each article, comes in 4 distinct sections. In the first case, there will be an introduction. The introduction begins with a brief introduction from the editors of the book describing, for instance, John Stuart Mill and his basic philosophical approach. You know, that they will say something about the philosopher you're about to read. The second section will be the reading questions. These are questions about, for instance, the Mill article that have definite answers that can be found in the article. So there are questions about, what does John Stuart Mill say about this? How does he respond to this argument, and so on, right? They will be questions like, what does Mill say about the definition of happiness, right? They will have definite answers in the text. Furthermore, the answers to all the reading questions appear chronologically in the text. So the answer to the first reading question will appear near the beginning of the article, the second reading question a little bit after that, and so on. So we'll come back to that later. Then, after the introduction and the reading questions, then there's going to be the text of the article. The article itself in Mill's own words. This is the most important part of the reading. You're going to be reading original sources. You're going to be reading what John Stuart Mill actually wrote. You're going to be reading what Aristotle actually wrote, and so on, right? So, the actual text of the article is going to be the most important, and also, I'm afraid, the most difficult part of any of the articles. Since it is in the philosopher's original words, it will sometimes be very difficult to read and require several attempts. Again, we will come back to that at the end of after I'm done with reading the syllabus here. I'm going to give some tips on making sense of the most difficult articles. The fourth and least interesting section of every chapter is the discussion questions. Each chapter ends with some discussion questions. These are just tools to inspire in-class discussions. You can ignore these if they want. They're of no importance, right? It's the reading questions towards the beginning of the chapter that are going to be the most important, and we'll come back to those. Now, it is important that you read the text of the article several times until you feel comfortable answering the reading questions. We'll come back to those now. The reading questions will be the basis for daily quizzes. We're going to take a quiz basically prior to every class. And the quizzes, which will be posted on Blackboard, the quizzes are all going to be based on the reading questions at the beginning of the chapter. The quizzes are going to consist of 5 questions. Those 5 questions are going to be taken from some of the reading questions. So it's very, very important that you read these articles and that you pay attention to the reading questions at the beginning of the chapter, and that by the time you're done studying for the class, that you're able to answer all of the reading questions. Now, one more difficulty, as if there aren't enough. One more difficulty about the book, the online book. If you look carefully at each page of the book, you will see that there are 2 page numbers. One in bold in the upper left or right-hand corner, and a smaller page number down near the text of the article. It's crucial that you ignore the smaller page numbers near the text of the page. The course schedule that you're about to read, or that I'm about to read to you, is based on the numbers in the upper left-hand corners. Ignore the rest. So when I say that Mill's article begins on page 319, I mean it begins on the page that is numbered 319 up in the right-hand corner. Forget any other page numbers down in the text. Why they're there is, I mean, who cares? It's very confusing. It has to do with the republication of the book. But anyway. Okay. As painful as all of that was to go over the intricacies of the free online book, that's now behind us. So if you have any further questions about navigating your way through the book, please contact me via email, and I'm more than happy to walk you through it. As you can tell, I myself am a little bit frustrated with how difficult it is to navigate. So, okay. So let's go over the class structure. Here's what your grade is going to be based on. Your grade is going to be based on 12 quizzes, 3 tests, the course objectives worksheet, and class participation. So those are the 4 elements that are going to comprise your grade. And let me just say, before we go, I'm going to go over each element of those: the quizzes, the tests, the course objectives worksheet, and class participation. Before I go any further, let me assure you, no extra credit, no delayed grades, no PRs will be offered for this course. If you want to pass this class, you're going to have to fulfill the requirements laid out under class structure in the syllabus. Okay? So let's go over every element of your grade. First of all, the quizzes. Quizzes will be multiple choice format and will cover the articles assigned for that day. Each day of the schedule, see below, that lists the reading for a given day means that there will be a quiz on that article by that day. Quizzes will be available online the night before class. I am going to post the quizzes at 4 p.m. the day before the class. Quiz questions will be based on the reading questions at the beginning of each chapter. Like I said, if you can answer the reading questions at the beginning of the chapter, you're going to be in good shape to take the quiz. Quizzes will be taken online in Blackboard and will be due by class time. So class time, is at 6 p.m. You will have until 6 p.m. to finish the finish the quiz. In figuring your final, so you're going to take 12 quizzes total. In figuring your final grade, I will drop the 2 lowest quiz scores, which means your course grade will consist of your 10 highest quiz scores. I do this in part because quizzes cannot be made up under any circumstances. If for some reason you must miss class or miss a quiz, even if the absence is excused, the quiz will have to count as one of your lowest dropped quiz scores. I will post the correct answers to the quizzes on Blackboard after they've been completed. Save your quizzes. Since quiz questions will be used as the basis for some of the test questions, you will need the quizzes to study for the test. Tests will end each of the 3 part. Okay, so that's the quizzes. Tests will end each of the 3 parts of the class and will cover the material presented in that section of the class. So, look ahead on your class schedule. You will see that Test 1 is on June 25th, Test 2 is on July 14th, and Test 3 is on July 29th. So, each test will consist of true-false questions and fill-in-the-blank questions. I will make the tests available I'm not sure how I'm going to do tests yet. But they are going to be open book. And I'm not sure if I'm going to I'll get back to you on tests. There's plenty of time. Quizzes and tests will both be open book and open notes and must be turned in by the deadlines given. So, now let's talk next about the course objectives worksheet. The course objectives worksheet is a handout featuring questions, problems, and definitions related to the course objectives on the first page of the syllabus. The worksheet is due by the end of the semester and must be completed to receive a final course grade. So, what happened was that I've been doing this job for a long time, more than 10 years now. The first few years I was doing, I got all my whole system down. I got my quizzes and my tests, got a whole thing going, right? And then one day somebody comes to me and says, here are some course objectives. You're responsible for putting these in your syllabus and making sure that all of your students are tested and graded on every aspect of the course objectives. Now, this comes from some shadowy administrative body that I'm not familiar with, but I'm a good soldier. I do what I'm told. And so I put the course objectives in my syllabus. Now, looking over these course objectives between my tests and my quizzes and so on, I was already doing most of these. Correctly defining and using relevant philosophical terminology, score, identify major classical and contemporary philosophers, score. Of course, there are some things on here that I was not doing and frankly wasn't entirely sure that I ought to be doing these in an intro to philosophy class. For instance, identify, construct, and evaluate arguments for validity and soundness and or strength and cogency, and criticize or defend some philosophical thesis. These were things I was not normally doing. So my way of doing them, of meeting the requirements, is through the course objectives worksheet. This is a worksheet that I will post on Blackboard. I will give a lecture at some point that will explain in detail how to fill out the course objectives worksheet. The worksheet itself will consist of 3 sections. It will be definitions. I expect you to use the definitions that I give you in the lecture. There will be a section on identifying valid argument forms. You don't know what that means yet, but you will after I give you the lecture. And there will be a section that will involve an essay, like a personal essay involving some philosophical issue where you have to criticize or defend some philosophical thesis. I will give you a whole host of possible topics that you might write on. That's going to be a short essay of like 7 sentences, so it's not going to be the end of the world. In fact, it is my deepest wish in life that once you have heard the course objectives worksheet lecture, that the worksheet itself doesn't take you more than 45 minutes to fill out. That's not true. My deepest wish in life is to be 6 feet tall, but I'm not going to hold my breath. You breezing through the course objectives worksheet is a close second. Okay. Where were we? Okay. Oh, attendance. So the attendance grade will be based on your attendance. More than 1 unexcused absence will lower your class participation score. More than 3 unexcused absences, because of the compressed nature of this class, will result in an F for the entire course. If you need to miss a class, if you're not going to be able to make it, I don't really see that happening. I mean, I'm recording these lectures, and you can listen to them basically at your leisure. So you'd have to talk pretty fast to convince me that you should be excused from the class. But anyway, more than 1 unexcused absence will lower your class participation score. I have how many? Wait for it. Attendance, you get 25 points possible if you miss, if you miss a class, I might knock you down like 5 points, but if you miss 3 classes, that's it, you flunk the class. Attendance for online classes will be conducted via an attendance password. In each lecture, I will say something like, the password is banana. And the password for this lecture is banana. So you must then email the password to me at my campus email to prove your attendance for that lecture. So just email me banana, and I know you watched this far. If you must miss class, please email me to let you know why you'll be absent. So the absence will be excused. See how much of that is relevant right now. Whether your absence is excused or unexcused, students are responsible for gathering notes and quizzes for the day that they are absent. So, okay. Next in the syllabus, we move on to the academic statements. We have the non-discrimination statement. If you think you're being discriminated against, please contact Thomas Walker. I want to call your attention to a couple of these. The accommodation statement, for instance. St. Louis Community College makes every effort to accommodate individuals with disabilities. If you have need any sort of special accommodation, or you have any sort of disabilities, everything from maybe you have ADHD and you need a special test environment, to you have poor eyesight and can't see the lecture, and need somebody to take notes for you or something. Anyway, there is a whole group of people down at the Access office at Forest Park. Well, maybe they're not physically there now, but their full-time job is to worry about accommodating students, right? So contact them. They are more than happy to talk to you and try to come up with an accommodation plan for you. They will reach out to me. They will keep it discreet, that I get a memo that I can't tell anybody about, and it will tell me about your special accommodation. The one limitation of the Access office is that they are not psychic. They cannot read minds. So you are going to have to go down and call them or email them or tell them what your special accommodations are. So once you do, they will work with you. One other thing I want to say about the administrative statements is I want to call your attention to statements on academic integrity. In case you haven't noticed, this class has been designed to keep student writing at a minimum. This is all based on grades and quizzes, or grades, on tests and quizzes, right? So there have not been many opportunities over the years for students to commit, say, plagiarism, right, which is the major bugaboo of academic integrity. So nonetheless, a few years ago, it was called to my attention that some of my quizzes and tests had been uploaded to a cheating website. You're familiar, hopefully you're not, but there are these academic websites online where cheating happens. People post tests and the answer to those tests, right? I won't name any of those sites since I don't want to promote them. But anyway, long story short, a lot of my test materials found their way up there. Now, I contacted this website. They promptly took them down. And ever since then, I have made this warning to all of my students. Any of the information that I write in my tests or my quizzes or give in my lectures or anything else is the intellectual property of me. It belongs to me, or it belongs to the authors of the book, right? Using that information without permission, like, for instance, uploading it to a website, is against the law. Not only is it illegal, it's also a violation of our academic integrity policy. So, if I ever find that you did this, I will track you down, and I will find you, and I will give you an F for this course. I don't care if it's a year from now or 5 years from now, I will find you, and I will have that power, and you will be sorry. So, let's be friends. Don't upload any of the information that you find on that you find in this class. Don't give any of your old quizzes to your boyfriend. Don't share them with any of your roommates. or any of your frat brothers. I don't know if there are fraternities at Forest Park. Anyway, don't do any of that. Just go ahead and wad them up and throw them away. So the screen went dark. Oh,
It's just on its view.
okay, right. So, okay. Okay. Then there's sexual harassment policy. If you feel you're being sexually harassed, there are procedures for that. The class cancellation policy. If for any reason class needs to be canceled, there's a power outage or something like that, you can find that information at any of the numbers there on the syllabus. So, okay. So let's go over the course schedule, the class schedule. Here's what we're going to be reading. Here's a list of all the things that we're going to be reading in your online textbook. So at this point in in-person classes, in normal circumstances, I would ask my students if any of them have taken a philosophy class before, right? I do this because I like to gauge people's familiarity with the topic of philosophy. If you've never taken a philosophy class before, you might be in for some surprises, some of them a little bit unpleasant or at least difficult, right? We, in this version of the class, we read original sources. That means that we are not reading modern philosophers writing about the views of Kant and Mill and Aristotle. We are actually reading Kant and Mill and Aristotle. Now, this means that the difficulty of the reading in this class might be something you've never encountered before. We're dealing with, in a lot of cases, people who are writing hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, and they're writing about, in some cases, very complicated and abstract subjects, right? So this provides, or this constitutes some problems for some of my students. So what I have done over the years is I have compiled a list of advice on tackling some of the most difficult readings. And by the way, we are going to be starting with some of the more difficult authors. So I'm kind of throwing you in on the deep end. Mill and Kant and Aristotle they're not easy to read. Okay, so here's some advice on making sense of them. First of all, don't just give up. I promise you, all of the articles that we're going to read in here can be made sense of. They are in English, and if you stick with them, they can be made sense of. So don't just give up. Here's the seven-step procedure that I have formulated over the years in trying to help students. For the most confounding articles, you might want to try to use the following procedure. 1 is prepare. Clear all distractions and be prepared for at least 2 hours of unimpeded concentration. None of the articles in this book are more than 10 pages, but it's going to be a tough 10 pages. Plan on reading all of these articles at least a couple of times to be able to get anything, to be able to understand them well enough to pass a quiz on. Step 2 is have a dictionary handy. If you don't know the definition of a word, look it up. Now, dictionaries are tricky. Sometimes philosophers use words in weird ways that don't show up in a standard dictionary. Immanuel Kant, for instance, uses the word maxim in a very technical way. If the dictionary definition is unhelpful, or the author seems to be using the word in a peculiar way, then please bring this up to me. You can email me, or you can point it out in the discussion section on Blackboard. Thirdly, pre-read. Read the introduction of the chapter. Each chapter begins with an introduction that gives a little bit of context about the philosopher and where the philosopher is coming from. Also, read the reading questions. Read through the reading questions, and use the reading questions to kind of maybe get in your mind what the most important parts of the article are going to be. Then read. There's no substitute for reading. Even if you don't understand what you're reading, move your eyes over every word. I promise you will get more out of it than you think you did. This is the voice of experience talking. If you think the first time I read Kant, I was like, yeah, no problem, got it. You're wrong. A lot of this stuff is difficult, but read the chapter as carefully as you can. If you don't understand it, just read it. If parts are terribly confusing, just go past them. Make a note of them, but go past them and just come back to them later. Then reread. Read the chapter again. Even if you thought you understood nothing, you will be surprised how much you comprehend the second time through. Next, I recommend that you refer more seriously back to the reading questions. On the second reading, use the reading questions to guide you through to the parts of the chapter that are the most important to understand the quiz. The answers to the reading questions appear chronologically throughout the chapter, so the answer to question 1 will appear very near the beginning of the chapter, the answer to the second question a bit past that, and so on. Next, if you've tried all of this and you still can't make sense of it, you can email me. I will not give you the answer to specific questions. Don't email me, hey, what's the answer to number 4? But I will answer general questions, provide helpful context, and clarify statements. If you want to say, hey, I can't find the answer to number 4, when Aristotle says this, I think he's talking about that, but then he says this other thing, so it's very confusing. That's the kind of thing that I can help with, okay? But don't just say, I don't get Aristotle, right? What can I do with that except give you my entire lecture, right? And don't just say, I don't know the answer to number 4. What is it? I'm not going to do that, right? Yes. So finally, in the event that I am not available, and I'm a bit of a night owl, so I tend to be up until 2 or 3 in the morning. So, if you email me then, it'll hit my phone, and I might be able to even talk to you then. In fact, I do some of my best work at 3 in the morning. But if that night I went to bed early and you can't reach me, I'm a realist. I know the world we live in. I know that you are going to feel an overwhelming urge to go up to Google and type in Kant's Ethics. Be careful. The very first website that's going to come up is Wikipedia. We all know the problems with Wikipedia. And if you don't, let me explain them to you. Wikipedia can be edited by absolutely anybody. So if some 12-year-old in Iowa thinks he's an expert on Kant, he can get up there and he can write anything he wants, and it's going to take a while before somebody at Wikipedia figures it out. So, and especially with Wikipedia, this is true of anything, philosophy and anything. The more technical a subject gets, the less reliable the information is. So, with that in mind, there is exactly one online source for philosophy that I endorse, and that is the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy Online. I give in the syllabus here, I give the little the address. That's also up on Blackboard. I put it up there somewhere. It's up under one of the links. Anyway, I can't say enough about SIPO, about Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy Online. You go up there, it's set up much like Wikipedia. They have a searchable database. You go up there and you type in Kant's Ethics. It will take you to several articles written by experts in the field, written in an introductory way, right? So that is a super source for people trying to get a general grasp on some of these tougher topics. Okay. Now, here is the point in class. If we were live, I would ask, okay, are there any questions? Are there any questions about the structure of the class, where your grade's going to come from? Any questions about the course objectives? Are there any questions about anything? And normally no hands go up, right? So then I say this. I say, okay, well, I have a question. What is philosophy? Right, and then often there is a somewhat uncomfortable silence, right? And in the long tradition of Socrates, sometimes somebody will raise, a couple people will raise their hands and give some definition of philosophy, and I will say, yeah, but what about this? People will say, well, philosophy is, what people believe about the universe, and then I will say, well, biologists believe that the cell is alive. That's something about the universe, or biologists, philosophers. And then the student will be like, oh, I have been shown my, people will give different definitions of philosophy, and very often they will be somewhat inadequate, right? Don't feel, and students should never feel bad. If you don't know what philosophy is, you're in very good company. Not only did our old friend Socrates not have a great definition of philosophy, but a few years back there was a podcast. I'm not even sure if they're out anymore. There was a podcast called Philosophy Bites, and Philosophy Bites as in small bites of philosophy. What would happen is a philosopher would interview other philosophers about some work that they were doing. In 20 minutes, tell me about the book that you're writing or the research that you're doing, right? And the very first episode of Philosophy Bites begins, it's half an hour long, and it begins by talking to 20 of the top philosophers in the world, the real rock star philosophers. There are rock star philosophers, I promise you. The most important philosophers in the world. They call Nigel Warburton, the host of the Philosophy Bites, calls up these philosophers on the phone and says, okay, here's a question I want to ask you for my new podcast. What is philosophy? You have 1 minute, go. Right. And he interviews, in half an hour, he interviews 20 different philosophers, right? And every one of these interviews begins with the same nervous chuckle. What is philosophy? Good question. What is philosophy? It's hard to say, and they give, sort of evasive answers like, when you ask what is philosophy, you're already doing philosophy, right? Which Socrates would hate because, that doesn't tell us what philosophy actually is, right? So, what is philosophy? Well, our textbook is helpful. The one online, it gives a definition that I kind of like, right? Philosophy is, according to our textbook, approaching fundamental questions with careful reasoning and honest reflection. That's not bad. That's got a few parts I like. Approaching fundamental questions. Philosophy is about fundamental questions. Careful reasoning is an important part of it, and honest reflection is also absolutely essential, and the kind of thing that I think a lot of people don't emphasize as much as they ought to when they talk about philosophy. So philosophy is also defined in a few other ways. The word from the Greek means literally the love of wisdom, right? Actually coined by Plato to describe Socrates, who I've mentioned, a million. You're going to think I'm obsessed with Socrates at this point. I'm not really, but he's a good place to start. Some other people have defined philosophy as the art of asking why, which is a cute little way of describing it, and does capture a certain essence of philosophy. We've all dealt with children. We've all dealt with little kids of a certain age who understand the importance of the word why, right? And they're always asking why. Why this? Why is the sky blue? Well, and you give them some answer and they want to know, well, why? 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 One way of thinking about philosophers is we're the people who never quite got past that phase. We always want to know why. None of this puts philosophy in a particularly academic sense, right? I mean, this is a class. It's a class like biology, like chemistry, like mathematics, like, jujitsu, like a number of other classes that you could have taken at Forest Park Community College. So where does this fit in any of these? So here's my answer to Nigel Warburton's question about what is philosophy. Here's the crack I would give at it. It might take longer than a minute, but not too much longer. So, okay, what is philosophy? Go back in time, way back. I mean, before smartphones, like way back 100,000, 200,000 years. You have human beings sitting around in caves and in forests. And they've developed early language, so they have some ways of communicating with each other and communicating with themselves. And they're sitting around in their caves, looking up at the night sky, and they're thinking to themselves, what is all this crap? Where does it come from? What is it made of? Is it different than me? Am I made of the same stuff as the stuff around me? Where is it going? Why is it that the sun sets or rises in the east and sets in the west? Right? Why is it when I eat certain berries I get sick and certain berries make me feel good? Right? Human beings want to know why. And we have this incipient, essential need to ask why and to understand the world around us. Right? Now, this why motivates us to learn more about the world, or motivates us to move out of our cave and explore the world. And as we explore the world, this why that we're asking, it divides up into different disciplines. People who want to know about which berries to eat, they become horticulturists. People who want to know why the heavens move in the way that they do, they become astronomers. People who want to know more about how to make about animals and how to make better animal skins, they go out and do their own thing, right? So we begin to become specialized. We begin to go out and explore our own curiosities about the world, right? Then flash forward a few thousand years, and we develop the scientific method, right? And the scientific method really gets the ball rolling. The scientific method really gives us an objective standard for deciding, well, what is knowledge? What does it mean to establish that something is indeed a fact, right? And this is where the division of labor in academia and in intellectual pursuits really becomes specialized, right? And you go around a college campus and you see that the different classes are differentiated by their methods for how they arrive at knowledge, how they arrive at facts, right? Start with math class. Any of the math classes, they have a very definite, very clear method for arriving at what the right answer is to this equation, right? To this problem in geometry and so on, right? And different fields of math are differentiated by the different methods that they use, right? Biology class, biology and chemistry class, they study different topics, but they're all beholden to the scientific method. They all adhere to the same basic method of, generally speaking, of arriving at what constitutes knowledge, what constitutes a fact, right? Now, so that's the college campus, divided up into all of these different disciplines, right? Differentiated by their different methodologies. So what is philosophy? Well, philosophy is what's left over, right? As different disciplines come up with different methodologies to arrive at knowledge, they break off from philosophy. Philosophy deals with this essential why that motivates human beings to be curious about the world, but as people develop different methodologies, they begin to break off, right, from philosophy, right? But there are, I insist, and yeah, many like me, there are some very, very important fundamental questions for which there is no definite method for arriving at an answer that still matter to human beings. And that is where philosophers come in. Philosophers have to deal with some of these fundamental trying to answer these fundamental questions, but they don't have a definite method, so they have to invent a method. So, and this is the trick. When we philosophers come up with an answer to a fundamental question, we not only have to fight over what the answer is that we've come up with, but we also have to fight over the method that we use to arrive at it, right? As I said, using the textbook definition of philosophy, it's approaching fundamental questions with a careful reasoning and honest reflection. Well, what are these fundamental questions? This is where normally, again, I would say, can you think of a fundamental question that's important to human beings for which there is no definite method for arriving at an answer? I don't see any hands up because I'm, alone, except for my wife. I'm alone here in my, what do we call this, a dining room? The bar room, really. Some hands go up and they say things like this. Does God exist? Right? An important question, some people would say, for which there is no definite agreed upon method for answering. Right? Good example. What is the nature of time? Is time a real thing, or is time some construct of the human mind, some way that the human mind makes sense of the sequence of things? Does the soul exist? Am I just a body? Am I just a brain? Or is there some non-material part of me that is contained within this body that maybe goes on after I die, right? What is good? What is the difference between good behavior and bad behavior? Is a good action an objective thing? Is it real in the way that this pen is real? Or are good and bad just people's opinions? These are all fundamental questions for philosophy. And these are all questions that matter to human beings, for which there's no definite way to arrive at a definite method for arriving at an answer. Now, a lot of people say, well, these are kind of, these are philosophers' questions, and they'll never get answered, and they don't really have any practical appeal. Well, I've got bad news for you. If you ever find yourself in front of a jury of your peers in a courtroom, the question of whether or not good exists, whether or not justice exists, and how justice is carried about is not going to seem like an abstract question, right? And so we philosophers, we tinker around with trying to figure out methods for answering some of these fundamental questions. So, pause for a second. Right?
It's hard for me to do from back here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm back. So, philosophy. Approaching fundamental questions with careful reasoning and honest reflection. Recently, the history of philosophy goes back thousands of years. In the last couple hundred years, there has been a certain taxonomy of the issues in philosophy that we will adhere to now because it's very mainstream, right? Philosophy generally is divided up into three separate issues and disciplines based on what series of questions they tackle, right? So the three branches of philosophy are ethics, epistemology, and metaphysics. In ethics, we deal with questions revolving around the question of what is good. What is good behavior? What is bad behavior? What is the difference between good behavior and bad behavior? Is it okay to do a bad thing sometimes if you achieve a good end? Is it okay, for instance, to cheat? Is it okay to steal from a gangster if you're going to use some of that money to do good with it? Right? Normally, it's wrong to steal, but what about if it's money you're going to use to do good? Is it okay to lie sometimes if the lie is going to turn out to be good? Maybe it's okay to kill sometimes if the killing is going to turn out to be for the larger good. These are the kinds of questions that we deal with in the field of ethics, right? Epistemology, the hardest to remember. It's a long word. You're probably not familiar with it. It's from the Greek. It means the study of knowledge, and deals with questions about, well, what is knowledge? How do we know things? There are a whole bunch of things that we believe, but there are a relatively small amount of them that we say that we know are true, right? I believe that Yadier Molina is the catcher for the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, if you look me in the eye and you shook your finger at me and you said, "Are you sure Yadier Molina is the catcher for the Cardinals?" Well, then, what does that do? Well, that causes me to begin to think of counterexamples. Think of, I haven't read a newspaper in a couple of hours. Maybe he was maybe he was seriously injured. Maybe he retired. Maybe he got, COVID-19. It's not going to play anymore, and maybe he got traded, et cetera, right? So what we see is that very often whenever we are challenged about things that we believe, we begin to play the skeptical game or begin to imagine counterfactuals. Now, if somebody said, well, I believe that 2 + 2 = 4, and you said, are you sure? Well, yes, I'm absolutely sure that 2 + 2 = 4. There's no doubt in my mind, right? And one of the questions in epistemology is, well, what's the difference? What's the difference between things that we are very, very confident are true? I say that, I would, in a bar conversation, I would say, yes, I'm positive that Yadier Molina is the coach of the Cardinals. Well, why is it that I'm willing to play the skeptical game whenever somebody really pushes me up to the line, but I don't play that same skeptical game whenever the question is about 2 + 2 = 4, right? And we don't even have to go so far as to mathematical knowledge. We can go to, are you sure you're in the state of Missouri right now? Well, yes, I'm positive I'm in the state of Missouri right now. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure, right? Now, maybe I'm hallucinating. Maybe I'm dreaming. Maybe somebody drugged me earlier today and took me to an exact replica of my house in Illinois. Right? There are a variety of sci-fi scenarios that I have to admit that are maybe at least possible, but none of that really matters. The truth of the matter is I'm positive I'm in Missouri. So in the field of epistemology, we try to come up with standards of what is knowledge, right, and what counts as knowledge. Thirdly, there is the field of metaphysics. Metaphysics is the question of what is real, what things are real. There are a variety of questions in metaphysics having to do with, for instance, as I said before, the nature of time. Is time a real thing, or is time something that human beings is just kind of a figment of human beings' imagination. Is the soul real? Do I really have a soul? If I made a list of all the things in the universe that exist, would Jason's soul be among them? Right? Is free will real? Is an important question in metaphysics. Do people have the ability to make free choices, or are all the choices that we make simply the product of the laws of nature and the history of the universe? Right? Important question, one obvious question in metaphysics is the question of does God exist? Right? Is God one of the things that is real? Right? That raises a whole sort of new branch of metaphysics, or indicates a new branch of metaphysics called ontology, which is the study of what things exist. And this leads to a lot of the questions of ontology lead to a lot of borderline cases, a lot of interesting arguments, right? Like whether or not there are facts about fictional objects, right? Do unicorns have one horn, right? Most of us would say yes. On the other hand, there are no unicorns. There's no unicorn that has one horn. So the sentence, the unicorn has one horn, actually turns out to be false. Harry Potter has a scar on his head. Yes, we all want to say yes to that. Although there is no Harry Potter and there is no scar. So how can there be facts about fictional objects? This is a question in metaphysics and in philosophy of language too. Anyway, so in the course of this course, we will be covering, at least dabbling a little bit in each of the three major branches of philosophy. We are going to begin with the field of ethics. We're going to talk about different ways of conceiving of the good, different ways of judging right versus wrong behavior, and different ways of talking about what our obligations are towards one another, if they exist at all. We are going to talk a little bit about epistemology when we talk about Descartes, but our questions about epistemology are very quickly going to seg into questions about metaphysics, which is where a lot of my interests really lie. And in metaphysics, we are going to talk about a whole bunch of things, questions about free will, and we're going to finish up the course talking about the big one, whether or not God exists, or whether it's possible to prove that God exists, and whether it's possible, as a lot of people believe it is, if it's possible to prove that the God of the Bible could not possibly exist. And we're going to consider a logical argument that claims to do just that from the Australian logician J.L. Mackie. So, okay. So, I believe that is, we went over the syllabus. I introduced a little bit of philosophy. Normally we would, jaw a little bit more if we were in class, but I think I will let you go. So, where we are going to begin, as I said, we're going to begin with ethics. We are going to begin with the question of what is it that makes an act good? We're going to look at a few different approaches. The first approach that we're going to look at is from John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill espouses a philosophy called utilitarianism. Utilitarianism believes that it's easy to decide whether or not an act is good or bad. The utilitarians believe an act is good to the degree that it creates happiness, and it's bad to the degree it creates misery. John Stuart Mill is going to spell out the basics of utilitarianism in the first few pages, and then he is going to talk about a variety of ways that people have objected to utilitarianism and why those objections don't matter. So, okay. The quiz on John Stuart Mill will be available tomorrow after 4 p.m. So take that and have it done by class time on Thursday. So I will, if you have any questions, email me as soon as you can, and I will try to answer them. So thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye.
To stop. I can't see the mouse.